What is the number one most useful tool in the RC hobby? I would have to say it's the soldering iron. Today we are going to go through a new soldering kit that's made for RC hobbyists from SRA Soldering. And I must say, out of the bat, I'm really liking the mix of parts. SRA Soldering Products has contacted me about putting together a kit for the RC hobbyist, specifically people that are into RC cars. And I must say the products that they sent in this potential kit are exactly what I would want to see. And they did send parts to me that were a little bit more on the upper end, but they also talked about having a more lower end kit. And that, to me, really says that they're looking to help us out as hobbyists, and they're also looking for input on people who do this daily. So let's just go through really quick what they sent to me and about the estimated cost on some of these main parts. So the Aoyue, I think that's right. I tried to figure out how to say this on the, just look on some other videos. Spell it out. A-O-U, no, I already said it wrong. A-O-Y-U-E, Aoyue. They sent this Aoyue 9378 Pro soldering station, which is a digitally controlled soldering station with replaceable wand. You plug it in there and a lot of different tips on there. And let's see, you can get macro tweezers, you can get macro? Yeah. Oh, and micro tweezers. You can get a smoke absorber, you can get an LED light on there, you can get a sculpting pin, you can get a regular handle along with your normal old soldering iron. But they have a lot of different tips that are available for these as well. We have used Aoyue in the shop for many years, and I have always been very impressed with the quality of their soldering stations. I've actually got one on the other side of the camera over there that also has a hot air wand included with it. Just really good kit. I'm really pleased to see that this is the brand that they chose. But they have the S3 tips, the 32LD, I think that says, and also the 32D. Out of all of these, you know, these are all pretty good chisel tips. I'm probably going to try out this 32D if the stock tip doesn't fit very well. But having these tips available, especially this S3 tip that has more thermal mass and just a really nice big tip to it, is going to help out when you're doing big jobs such as replacing the leads on a brushless motor. There's a lot of thermal mass on the inside of these cans. We can just take a look here at the stator. This is the stator that would normally be inside of a brushless motor, and these wires go through. You can tell there's a lot of copper mass. Copper really loves to sink heat fast, and then they've got all of this steel as well on the inside, and with all of that combined, it can be a bear to desolder leads on this sort of can, the one where you have these, you know, these soldering posts, so to speak. It just heat sinks right into the motor. As we have discussed before, you can always preheat this in an oven. I would say maybe 150 Fahrenheit for a couple of minutes, just to get it warmed up enough to where when you put the soldering iron on, it doesn't suck all the heat out immediately. So really pleased to see that this iron is being offered in their Pro kit, or will be offered. We'll see in the future, but I'm pretty sure this is going to go through, just because this is going to be a really awesome kit. I'm looking forward to having some new stuff in the hobby house for myself, and this will do everything that I need. Another really handy part, this tip cleaner. Essentially, it's a brass steel wool. That doesn't make sense. A brass wool. Is that what you would call it? Let me know in the comments. Also from Aoyue. That, yeah, I always have these on hand. I have extras of the little insert, the woolly inserts, and we keep them at the shop. I keep them here. It's on every single soldering station that I have at this point because it works really well. It's one of the best ways to clean your tips. They have also provided a 3% silver 0.031 inch diameter with, let's see what kind of flux this has. I'm not sure if it says what sort of flux it is. I believe this is the easy clean flux that they included on this, but it is a flux core. Just the right diameter. We did poll y'all on Instagram and Facebook and found out that most people do prefer 0.31. I figured you'd probably go with the 0.06. However, just like me, you like the thinner stuff because it is easier for you to apply just the right amount with not too much, especially when you're dealing with stuff like battery plugs. It doesn't really take much to get on there, and if you already have your wires pre-tinned, it's just super easy to get too much on there with a larger wire size. So I was happy to see that they included that size. Another thing that is really handy is these helping hands. And this one actually comes with a magnifier as well. So it's got a heavy base, it's got the 2 arms, and then it has a magnifier, which you may or may not need. It looks like it can be taken off fairly easily. And that will help when you're trying to put some pieces together, maybe a wire into a plug or something like that. We use those a lot at the shop too. So really happy to see that involved in this combo. They also included this 486 plus smoke filter, I guess it would be called, a smoke absorber. If you don't have a vent, in the shop we have a vent, of course, we have a fume hood, but here we don't have a vent. And I'm not gonna cut a hole in my wall, and I'm not gonna spend the hundreds of dollars that it would take to properly plumb a vent hood, not to mention actually buying the hood itself. If you wanna buy a professional vent hood, it's like 700 bucks. So I usually just go and get an old hood from an oven and then wire it up that way. That's what we got in the shop right now, although we're going to a more professional setup in the future. At any rate, this will be really handy, especially for in here where I don't have the luxury of filtration systems or something kicking fumes out my window. These Xuron, these are the side snips, I want to say, micro shear flush cutters, model 172AS. These are exactly what we use in the shop as well. And the pair that we have on the motor winding station, it's a little shorter handle set just because you don't need a lot of leverage when you're cutting copper wire all the time. But I would estimate they've probably gone through about 4,000 armatures, and on each armature it gets snipped 3 times. So 12,000 cuts at one station that they sit at, and they're absolutely just as sharp as they were on day one. The guy behind the camera is nodding because he knows what set that we use, and he's used it before, and they stay sharp. They're really nice as a flush cutter. They do a good job about not having anything above the surface. This could also be used for really small work, maybe surface mount or through hole mount type work when you need to cut a little bit of flash off or a leg that extends through. These are really handy, really handy. Now, the stuff that I could probably do without, but will be handy to have around as tools, we have these tweezer nose pliers with serrated jaws. So it is just a little bit of serration, just enough on the tips of these jaws to give you a little bit of bite or purchase, so to speak, when you're holding small parts. Typically, I'm just going to use the set of helping hands on here. So this is not something that I would necessarily use, but when you get to the point that you're working really fine components and maybe you have a leg that you need to bend around, these can be really handy. So I say it's not something that I would probably use. However, it will come in handy if you don't have any other needle nose pliers, which I've got needle nose pliers all around. So, take it for what it is. I have a lot of tools already. This desoldering pump from Aoyue, that's a hard one to remember. Do they even have a part number on this? AO9302. I use this in the shop quite frequently when I am reworking stuff. If I have to do any repairs on products and it is difficult getting the solder over, if I have to get a component off of a board, these are invaluable. And I'll just show you how these work real quick. But I didn't know what I was going without until I got one. So really recommend if you ever do rework or if you ever plan on doing small work on PCBs, these things are awesome. So you would heat up where it is, and you can see I pressed down the plunger so it's primed. You press this button and then it sucks in, and then you press it again and it's gonna eject out. You can see maybe on the camera where that metal piece, here, let's get a little bit there. You can see where that metal piece is coming out, and that will eject any of the solder that is left inside. Really handy tools. Just pop. It's something that I will use for sure. And then we also have these wire strippers. So it has a little wheel, little serrated wheel. We'll just show you these because these are gonna be really handy for me. It's got this serrated wheel that you can adjust the size of like this for different wire sizes. And it also has these essentially it's a diamond shear. And you put the diamond shear around the wire and then just pull off your jacket. Works really well as it is with your standard silicone jacketed wire, even PVC jacketed wire or a PTFE jacketed wire. This is still going to pull it off, especially because these diamond shears do have an actual shear cutting face. So it's angled, it is sharpened. basically you just don't go too far. You just have to put enough pressure to cut it, and you can either pull it off with that, or you can use this little knurled wheel to pull it off a little bit more gently, and you don't have to worry about slicing some of your wires. So that is the entire kit. I am going to clean up this area a little bit, and I'm going to do some test soldering to see how well this stuff does. Forgot 2 items. We have this tip tinner. This is extremely important if you have a hard time keeping your tip tinned. It's really not so bad when you're using one of these cleaners, but if you use a wet rag or a wet sponge to wipe off your tip, this will keep it saved. Essentially, at the end of your job, you can just dip it in this substance, and when you heat up for the next job, it's going to be sure that you are tinned. Or if you lose your tinning because you are feeding wire directly onto the iron face, and it will do it. Trust me. Some of you have, let's politely call it, disagreed with me in the comments about having the tinning removed from the tips, and you can kind of see here. Let's get a little zoom in on that. You can see where there's a tinned surface on there, and it typically is going to be a nickel coat. That does get eaten away when you have a flux cord solder, especially something with a more aggressive. The easy clean is not so bad, but the more aggressive rosin flux or acid flux will take it right off. And but the big reason that it eats it off is because a lot of people will put this directly on the iron, and I've told you this in the past, and especially with lead-free solder. With leaded solder, the temperatures are so low that you really don't have an issue, but with lead-free, when you're feeding directly onto the iron tip like that, it eats away, not only mechanically, but the flux itself pushes and tries to eat away at your actual tinning on the tip. So it will eat away at it at a time. If it gets through the tinning, then it will actually eat away at the tip itself, and it'll get a big old pit. We have ones in the shop where one of my employees had a habit of doing that, and it's literally a big old crater in the tip. It has stayed tinned over time just because we've kept care of it, and we have one of these guys that we constantly shove it in and it keeps it tinned. But just as a word of warning, you will eat away at your tinning if you don't use things right. But having this tinning product, this is the SRA TT21G, it will help you out. So you can abuse your tips and just use that every time, and you don't have to worry about it. So whether you want to call it lazy or smart working, either way, it's going to work out better for you. And then their rosin paste flux here. This is SRA Flux number 135. And that is going to help us out when we have something really dirty. Typically, I'm not going to have to use it on my own products. If we just look at some of these, the motor wires on this are already tinned, essentially. They have solder embedded into them. The parts where you would solder onto these brushed motors, they are gold plated. Gold plated is essentially like tinning. It will accept solder with minimal amounts of flux. So we're not going to have to apply extra flux. Just the flux core is plenty by itself. A lot of times you don't even need flux to get it to adhere to gold, but just in case there's a little bit of oil on the surface or something like that, it's good to have at least a flux core. But if it's really dirty, really dirty, or if it is a bare copper wire in particular that's had any time to sit out and oxidize, then this will help greatly. Put a little bit on the surface, maybe give it a mechanical clean with a knife or something like that. You can use sandpaper too if you want, but this will help you out greatly when you got something that's just being difficult. Maybe those gold-plated bullet plugs sat around for too long and the gold plating wasn't quite thick enough. There's a lot of reasons why you may have to use this. So extremely valuable to have around just in case. It's better to have it and not ever need it than it is to need it and not have it, because what you would go to the hardware store and buy a lot of times is not going to be quite as good as this rosin paste flux, or it's going to be acid based, which is going to eat away at your electronics. Please never use an acid based flux unless you know you can really clean it well. And the reason why I say that is because let's say we use an acid flux on these wires. The flux is going to soak down our wire jacket and onto the inside. Now, if it is still a coated wire, it's not going to be a big deal, although the acid will still soften your plastic coating over time. However, if we don't have any insulation down inside this jacket, or let's face it, in something like this where it's simply stranded wire, the acid will get into here and work up about that far or so, and then it is going to slowly eat away at your wire. And over the course of maybe a couple of years or so, you may be flexing it, and then suddenly, hey, my motor's not working anymore, and you go to pull on it, and it completely separates because that acid has eaten away at the copper over time. That is why we never, ever, ever recommend using acid flux on electronics. Not only will it do stuff like that, but the vapors can get out and around. Let's say I use it on this, the vapors could get inside my commutator and make it pit and be extremely unhappy. So just don't do it. If you think you're good enough to clean it off of all your surfaces, then yeah, sure, take a risk, but I'm not going to do it on any of mine unless it's like a do or die situation. I've had to use it on a a full-size battery terminal on a truck of mine where I had no other option but to do an emergency fix, and I had to use some solder on there, and there was no way that rosin was even touching the corrosion that was on it. So I had to get out some acid flux. I beat it in really good with a wire brush. I cleaned it off. I did it one more time. I cleaned it off, and then I was actually able to get a little bit of solder to stick. But extreme situation, you're probably not going to run into that very often. Just don't even use acid flux. All right, so now that I have talked my face off, we are going to try to throw some stuff on the floor. All right, so got everything out of the package that I'm going to be using for this. The third hand tool, I'm not sure. Here is our detachable wand that goes with this 9378 Pro station. We have ourselves the soldering iron holder along with this little guy here, so you can pretty much take it out, shove it in there, put it back in, etc. Have our solder holder, and then we also have, besides these really sweet Xuron flush cutters, we have this smoke absorber as well, and let's see how loud it is. That's not too bad. That's not too bad. It also comes with a 4-inch duct that I'm assuming you can shove it out the window or into your neighbor's house or however you want to do on there. I'm not going to be using the solder sucker on this job today, which sucks, but you know, another day. So let's get to it. First, we need to make sure that the Aoyue is not on the screen, and that means we need to plug in our iron. And let's see if the error goes away. There we are. Boop, boop. Oh boy. She's climbing in temperature, or maybe it's going down in temperature, I don't know. But there's this plastic shroud on there that you got to remove first. So I just shut her off for now. Make sure that we're seated properly. There we go. So make sure you remove this dip. There we go. Now we're not going to be burning plastic. I know this is not going to have enough thermal mass to do what I want to try today, which is to desolder these leads on this brushless motor. This is a Polar Pro stubby. So it's not the biggest as far as thermal mass is concerned, but these are a pain in the butt for the average customer. So let's see if this $100 soldering iron will do it. But I'm gonna add the not the beefiest tips. Let's just do the beefiest tips. Let's do these S3s. While the iron is still cool, now's the time to put on the proper tip for the job. And it had just started to warm up. I almost burnt that plastic shroud that was on there. They do offer another additional ceramic tip with this kit. So let's see, hot enough to touch. Yeah, I'm not gonna mess with it right now, but essentially you see this piece. This piece is replaceable. So even if your wand breaks, you don't have to buy a whole new wand. You just buy the ceramic heating element and it slips right in. Let's see. Here it is in the package. It has a 3-pin connector and it looks like a little spring on there. So we're more than likely we would have to unscrew this top portion of our wand and then in and out. Nice and easy. Although it doesn't always go nice and easy to replace that. When you have something like this that thermal cycles thousands of times before you ever have to replace a part, sometimes they can lock together really hard. And I have actually had to replace the entire wand assembly, which still is not that bad as far as cost, just because they lock together every now and then where it is not gonna move. But we're also talking an iron that would literally stay turned on for 8 hours a day plus for years on end. So it's really hard to complain about needing to replace a wand after 3 or 4 years of literally daily abuse. I don't want to get it twisted that I'm complaining about replacing the whole wand. No siree. I've really been impressed with these Aoyue products. All right, back to it. Wait. we need to make sure that our solder is attached on the stand to our iron stand. And what's the best way to do it? But we need to get out the shortest Phillips head screwdriver for the job and then clear some space. We've got to clear some space to stand because here we go. Got to line it up. Oh, we're gonna have to line this shot up perfectly. You know, I hate it when somebody else uses my pool cue. Yeah, tightened well from the factory. What sort of grip do you like to use your long soldering iron? You sort of this guy, or you kind of go over the knuckles, or you do like a big plant? Let me know in the comments what sort of long screwdriver action you prefer. Little pinchy-do action like this. A 3-point. Good old Phillips head. It lets you be sort of off angle, as opposed to the Terrence head. That one would not let you be off angle, and it just didn't gain adoption like the Phillips. I do hear that Terrence and Philip just weren't good friends after that. Although they did go on to star in some cartoon. All right, so now that we are done with this, now we got our nice fat soldering tip on there. Oh yeah, that's the sort of beef that I want. Oh, and I put it on the wrong side. Oh well. How did I do that? I flipped it around. Whatever, I'll deal with it. All right, so we're gonna turn this on. We're gonna see it's on 476 Celsius. That is pretty high. Oh boy, let's see how fast she goes. Hey, nice and fast. I like that. So I'm gonna start at 375. We'll see. Okay, 376 because it won't do an odd number, I guess. And we're gonna see what happens. She's heating up fast. That's always a good thing. And the ceramic tip elements like this are really good for that. And also having fast thermal recovery. Added with a large tip like this, and you can probably see the first smoke coming off. And they do a really good job. I have been extremely pleased with all of my ceramic element soldering irons. So let's clean this up a little bit. First thing, easy test. We're going to take the wires off and put them back on to this motor. And I'm going to use these other motors to just steady it because the magnets are good enough that it won't roll around. If your motor is rolling around, it's extremely difficult to work with, and that's no fun. That's simply no fun. So at 376, will it melt the solder? Yes, it will. And the smoke absorber, hey, that's got pretty good pull. I like that. All right. So essentially, we'll get a little, we have to put it onto the tip to get it going sometimes to get enough thermal transfer. Little layer on the side. There we go. Oh, I didn't put on my safety glasses. This is a travesty. Don't forget your safety glasses. I have been flicked in the face by solder. Flicked in the face by solder way too many times in my life and have gotten way too lucky, and somehow I still have both of my eyes working. And yet I forget to put on my safety glasses. Just don't do it. As soon as this lets go, it could flick it right into my face. It could flick it right into your face too. Have you ever had that happen? Let me know in the comments. All right, so we're adding a little bit of solder, add a little bit of force, wiggle it around. Oh yeah, that's a nice tip. I like this tip. That's the 3S, I think it was. So as far as doing motors, doing plugs and stuff like that, I think the larger tips are gonna work better, the chisel tip style. And now that we're getting a little bit of, there we go, a little bit of crusties on there, now is the time when you start to wipe it. And that is essentially the flux burning. Now, will it do this? I am not very confident in this, but let's see how BA this soldering iron is gonna be. I'll add a little bit of fresh solder just to give it a leg up. Oh, yes. even on this low temperature setting, I would consider this low. Oh yeah, 376. We would normally run ours at like 425 to be able to do this at the shop. Oh man, all right, I would do all of them. That was nice, that was fun. That took no time at all, hardly. All right, we do have some oxidization on the top of the original solder, so I'm just rubbing it back and forth. Instead of adding more solder to the iron tip, I'm just giving it a little mechanical rub back and forth. Just rub it back and forth. Everybody loves it when you rub your solder until it gets soft. There we go. Rub it until it gets soft. There we go. And bam, that, oh yeah. So this station, this 9378 is definitely good enough for doing motor work. I didn't think it would be, but with this slightly beefier tip, I didn't try it with the normal tip, but with the slightly beefier tip, oh yeah, that went way too smooth. So I can highly, highly recommend this iron at this point. It's $100 for the iron only, but SRA/soldering or SRA solder, which one is it? I think both.com, SRAsoldering.com, SRA-soldering.com. There we go. We'll put the link down below. That's where this came from. I'm sure you can find it at lots of places on the internet. However, with this company being willing to work with us on a custom kit that is going to be exactly what we need, you're going to be able to get a better deal on getting the whole package, so to speak. So getting the brass wool, getting your solder, getting the iron, getting some third hands at the same time. And honestly, this smoke absorber is really nice. I'm going to be keeping this at the hobby house since I don't have a fan ejection. Oh yeah, we forgot about this. It's even got a little light on here. If I can figure out how to turn it on, one of these buttons. Oh, it needs a battery, I think. Maybe. That's interesting that it needs a battery on something that plugs in. Oh yeah, it needs a 9-volt battery. Oh well. I've got plenty of light in the studio. Plenty of light. I'm not sure when these are going to pop up on the website at SRA Soldering. I'm not sure if I'm going to carry these combos in my website, but what I did want to do was to at least give them some feedback on these products, let them know whether or not they work. Winners with that bigger tip, let me tell you, this is probably one of the easiest soldering jobs that I've done in a long time with a new iron that I honestly didn't have a whole lot of faith in for doing the really hard jobs. So awesome, flying colors on that, and especially for the price. I like how it adjusts extremely fast up and down. That is the one downside to the Hakko FX 888 that I never liked. You press the button on the digital version and it just takes forever to scroll through temperatures, and honestly not a lot of people are going to be changing temperatures on there, so it's not that big of a deal. But when you're using it a lot like I do, and when you sometimes change amalgams on there, when you want different temperatures, it's a pain in the butt to be waiting like that. So I like the way that this one works. I really like the thermal recovery on this was really fast. I went from post to post. So man, 2 thumbs up on this. If you're looking for a nice soldering setup, this is going to be a great one for you. And they have also told me that there's a slightly lower level kit that they're also going to have available if you're looking for something that's maybe a $50 range with everything included. So we'll get a little bit more information on that one in the future. If you want to hear about it, let me know in the comments, and let me know what you think about how this worked and the components that went with it. Maybe you have also used Aoyue yourself in the past and have some experience with it, but from my experience today and my experience in the shop, it is top quality equipment. Just everything that came with this is exactly what I would buy for myself or have already bought for myself. So they really did the research. They got it right this time. Bam, love to see that. Thank you for sending this over for me to review SRA. I enjoyed this, and on top of that, I'm gonna really enjoy having a new fresh soldering station for this one. So I'm gonna do some soldering on some other rigs here and bid you adieu. So as always, thanks for tuning in. Have a good day.